One of the most expensive things on a steakhouse menu used to be the food people were embarrassed to eat. Today, lobster arrives like royalty. White plate, melted butter, polished silverware. A price tag that looks less like dinner and more like a small financial decision. But in early New England, lobster was not treated like a luxury. It was common, cheap, messy, coastal. And in some versions of the story, it was the sort of thing served to prisoners, servants, apprentices, and people who did not have many choices about dinner. That version is famous. It is also a little too neat, because the real mystery is not whether lobster was ever prison food. The real mystery is how America learned to forget that lobster was once ordinary. The lobster did not change. The story around it did. I'm Silas Whitlock, and this is Cross-Wired History. Long before lobster became a status symbol, it was simply part of the coast. Indigenous peoples used the resources of those waters long before Europeans arrived. Later, English settlers found themselves in a landscape where the sea could be both a pantry and a threat. In 1623, William Bradford described a hard moment for the Plymouth settlers, when the best meal available might be a lobster or a piece of fish. Not exactly the language of a luxury tasting menu. The important thing here is not that lobster was bad. It was that lobster was available. And availability has a strange effect on human beings. When something is rare, we call it special. When everyone can get it, we start looking for reasons not to be impressed. Along parts of the New England coast, lobster could be gathered cheaply near shore. It was not yet the expensive centerpiece of a celebration. It was practical protein, local food, survival food, the kind of thing that becomes invisible precisely because it is everywhere. You have probably heard it. Lobster was once fed to prisoners. Servants complained about eating it too often. Some stories even claim there were rules limiting how often it could be served. At least, that is the version that gets passed around. The safer version is this. In later accounts and regional memory, lobster was often described as low-status food. It was associated with poverty, servants, prisoners, apprentices, and cheap institutional eating. But the dramatic version, prisoners being force-fed lobster constantly, or laws protecting servants from too many lobster dinners, is harder to pin down. That does not make the story useless. Because even if the cleanest version is folklore, folklore usually grows around something real. Lobster was cheap enough, common enough, and low status enough that later generations could believe the story immediately. That tells us plenty. The myth is not the whole truth. It is a doorway. And on the other side of that doorway is a much stranger machine. Lobster did not become luxury because someone looked at it one day and said, "Actually, this sea insect deserves a chandelier." Instead, lobster moved through a series of systems, and each system changed what people thought it was worth. In the 1840s, lobster canning began in Maine. Lobster was no longer just a local food gathered and eaten near the coast. Canning did something subtle. It detached lobster from place. A food once tied to rocky shores, tide pools, and coastal kitchens could now be packed into metal and sent elsewhere. On the coast, lobster came with memory. People knew it as common, cheap, maybe repetitive, maybe low status. But away from the coast, those memories did not travel as well. The can could move the meat. It could not move the stigma. By the mid-1800s, rail transport and improved shipping made it easier to move lobster inland. It moved lobster into a world where many diners had no inherited memory of it as poor food. On the coast, lobster might be too common to impress anyone. But inland? It is from somewhere else. It smells of the sea. It carries a region with it. It suggests travel, distance, freshness, expense. The same animal becomes a different object because it enters a different room. This is the hidden force in the story. Distance. Distance from the coast. Distance from poverty. Distance from memory. Distance from the people who once ate it because it was there. By the time lobster reaches new markets, it has already begun its disguise. Tourism helped finish what canning and railroads began. In the 19th century, coastal New England became a place to visit, not just a place to work, fish, or survive. Visitors came looking for scenery, salt air, regional charm, a taste of the coast, and lobster was waiting for them. To locals, it could still carry old associations. To tourists, it was authentic. That is a dangerous word. Authentic is what happens when someone else's ordinary life becomes your vacation experience. It was no longer just cheap coastal food. It became a regional experience. Poverty food became vacation food. And vacation food has a way of becoming souvenir, ritual, and status symbol all at once. A visitor does not simply eat the lobster. They eat the coast. They eat the trip. They eat the story they will tell when they get home. Then restaurants entered the scene. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, lobster was appearing in urban dining culture more prominently. In some places, it was still transitional, not instantly the king of the menu. But the setting was changing, and setting matters. Put a food in a rough bucket, and it looks like labor. Put it under a chandelier, and suddenly it has aspirations. Restaurants understood something that markets understand very well. Presentation can become part of the product. A waiter, a menu, a white tablecloth. A room full of people performing the act of being able to afford the room. As lobster demand grew, the easy abundance that had shaped its early reputation began to erode. Canneries processed large numbers of lobsters. Fishing pressure increased. Regulation followed. Maine's 1895 size limit is one of those quiet details that tells a bigger story. The fishery was no longer just an endless gift from the shore. It had become an industry. Scarcity has a strange talent. It can make people admire what they once ignored. So the chain reaction continued. Abundance made lobster cheap. Cheapness made it low status. Canning made it mobile. Railroads made it distant. Tourism made it special. Restaurants made it elegant. Scarcity made it expensive. And then the price helped convince everyone the story had always been true. That is the clever part. Luxury often pretends to be natural. It wants you to believe certain things are expensive because they simply deserve to be. Sometimes luxury is rarity. Sometimes it is labor. Sometimes it is quality. And sometimes it is a story that successfully escaped its old neighborhood. Lobster escaped. Not all at once, not by conspiracy, not through one grand campaign planned by a secret council of men in bibs. Lobster escaped through canneries, rail lines, seaside hotels, restaurant menus, shrinking abundance, and human beings doing what human beings do best, deciding that the thing just out of reach must be worth more, because the lobster never had to become luxurious. It only had to travel far enough from its old reputation. And somewhere between the cold New England shore and the white tablecloth, America did what it has done many times before. It took something ordinary, moved it far enough away from its old meaning, and sold it back to itself as treasure. Remember, history isn't a straight line. Keep looking for that next connection.